I was just asked about Brother Rom. Brother Rom went to see the President May 1st. Most of you have heard about that. And that was a great privilege for a member of the Restoration branches to be able to talk to the President. Many people ask me, well, how did he get that appointment in the first place? And Brother Rom was asked to go. Well, he was a good friend of the Nepalese ambassador. In fact, I think they're family related through marriage. And he was asked to come to Singapore when the North Korean leader met the president. And the ambassador, well, the Nepalese army, they're very famous. Their soldiers are called the Gurkhas. Many of them serve in the Indian Army and also in the British Army. And so they were invited to come and to coordinate with the American security forces there in Singapore. And they needed a man that could translate English to Nepalese, Nepalese to English. And the ambassador knew Brother Ram, so he asked him to come. He was paid by the State Department to go there and travel, plus his salary while he was there. I'm sure he was paid real well. I don't know. He didn't say. But he met the president there. I don't know whether they talked personally, but I think maybe he was introduced. And he was given an award signed by the president for his services during that meeting. And after the meeting, the ambassador, Nepalese ambassador of the United States, asked Brother Ram if he would like to have an appointment with the president. Said he could arrange that probably. And so that's how it happened. He made an appointment with him, and it was scheduled first last December of 18. And it was rescheduled then by some conflict for May 1st of this year. And I was praying that it wouldn't be rescheduled again. The president, of course, is very busy. I don't know how he gets all the work done he does, do you? And he's just a very energetic person. And so he went there, and how did it go? It went really well. We communicated back and forth and what he should say to the president, what he should introduce. And of course, the Book of Mormon is a very precious thing to Brother Ram. And he introduced the Book of Mormon to him. The president said he had never been introduced to the Book of Mormon before. And Brother Ram said, well, you're the president of Joseph's land. And of course, he's got a son-in-law that's Judah, so now you got Judah and Joseph together, and brothers in the 12 tribes. And I said, Brother Ram, did you pray with him? I'd asked him before if he was going to pray with him, and he said, oh, yes. And he introduced my book also to him. And he turned it over and read the biographical on the back. He said, oh, he's a veteran. And he kind of likes veterans. And then Brother Ram said, well, chapter 24 says, in this book, says that the Book of Mormon has an urgent message for all Americans. And the president said, well, I want to mark that page for me. And So then when they had about 45 minutes together, and when it got toward the end, they got down, both on their knees, and well, Brother Ram was on both knees. The president was just on one knee, I guess, and the president said, well, you do the praying, and I'll pray silently. But he said there was a good spirit. And there were probably thousands of people praying for that appointment, and so we can expect that the spirit would be there. And he said that it was just almost like brothers. Of course, Big Brother and Little Ram, and he said he put his arm around him. And so it was a good meeting, and hopefully we'll be some good fruits from that. I like Brother Trump. I'm not ashamed of that. I said that, did I call him brother? Yeah. Well, I feel that way about him. I feel like his election was the sign of God's favor upon this land yet. Because, all the polls and everything didn't have a chance. I think even President Trump was maybe surprised that he got it. That night, probably a lot of you watched the news that night and saw how those returns came in. It was just a real blessing, made my heart feel good. When I first found out that President Trump was going to be a nominee or going to be running for the president, I thought, well, he'll never get elected. Or if he does, I even told my secretary, I guess, I said, if he ever gets elected, it'll be by divine intervention. I was really pulling for Ted Cruz or Ben Carson. I liked him. But then when the night when he selected Mike Pence, I was pleased with that as his running mate. And I'd been praying, Lord, we need a praying man in the White House. And, when Mike Pence debated or was with the Democratic running mate, one of the last questions that was asked, I watched that, and one of the last questions asked was to the vice presidential running mates. The question was asked, what about your religious lives? And Pence said, well, I like to spend a little time on my knees every day. And I thought, that's what I want, a praying man in the White House. I even checked to see if he had an office in the White House, and he does, in the West Wing. So I'm pretty happy. The opposition he has is just a sign that Satan's out to get him, but he's been real strong. Keep praying for him. Our nation means a lot to me. I know it does to all of us. So that's enough on politics, I guess. But I think most of you probably feel the same way. I'm going to hand out some papers here. Kathy, is it Kathy? Catherine? And Rachel can help too. Hand out this first one. Oh, well, you divide it here. I'll need one, Rachel. Thank you. I want to look at the world history. I think we need to kind of, I'll be teaching you a little bit on mathematics, a little bit on history. and some on scriptures, quite a bit on the scriptures. But I think we kind of need to, most of you already know these figures, but they're important points in world history, and we kind of have to get a view of them. Starting with the creation, Abraham was about 1876 BC. The Exodus was in 1446. 40 years later, they entered the Promised Land. Then you need to understand that there were 12 tribes. You all understand that, I think. Thank you. And the 12 tribes were united for a while, and then the kingdom split. You know, they had judges. First it was Moses, then they had the judges, and then they wanted a king in about 1 Samuel, and the Lord said, let them have a king. And Solomon, David and Solomon were the great kings of Israel, united. And then after Solomon, the kingdom split. Most of you know this, just review a little bit. Into the north and to the south. The north was called Israel or Ephraim. For the 10 lost tribes came out of the north. They divided into the south. Jeroboam was king of the north, and Rehoboam in the south, and Judah. And so that was when the nation divided, was about 931 BC. Then in 721 BC, the northern kingdom was taken captive into Assyria. About 588. We know this connects then with the Book of Mormon history. About 600 BC, they left to come to America. And then a few years later, Judah was carried captive to Babylon. We talked about Babylon this morning. And then we have the kingdoms depicted here. We've got really here the whole history of the world from the time of Daniel until the present day. You had the Babylon, Media-Persians, Greek Empire. Jesus came in during the Roman Empire, which was from 168 BC to 570. Then you had the rise of the papacy. These are important dates. Reformation movement, Restoration movement, rebirth of Israel, liberation of Jerusalem in the 7th millennium. We're in the 7th millennium, and I think we're on borrowed time a little bit here because we're going into the 7th millennium. And this is the history as we know it. May not be precise, but pretty close, I think. So, my topic was prophecy of the restoration. And there's two men in the Bible that I love, many of them in the Book of Mormon, many men like Alma and Lehi and Nephi especially, and others in the Book of Mormon. But in the Bible, I think my two favorite ones might be, they're hard to pick, but I think maybe John and Daniel. Daniel in the Old Testament and John in the New Testament. Both men were called beloved. Were very beloved people. The Lord loved both of them very much, and they were very faithful servants, of course. And if you would take out your, see on the back here. Yeah, that's our first. And then we'll have to maybe take out this next handout. You got plenty for everybody, I know. Very few extras. I'm checking your eyes too at the same time. When you study the prophecy of the coming forth of the restoration, how many have this book by Daniel McGregor? Most of you do. And it's a wonderful book. I wasn't quite satisfied, so I made this chart to go along. So all of this information is on this sheet is in here too. But it covers a lot of territory. And when I put this out, I put it, Daniel McGregor's work on this sheet here. And my secretary, I'd always say, she said, I can't do that. I said, yes, you can. And so she put it together, and then it's a little bit too big to have for everyone. So you can check your eyes here. With my bifocals, I can barely read it. But the amazing thing, I'll just show it right at first, is how every one of these prophecies culminate in 1830. So that is a very important date in world history. And we'll kind of see, we'll work on a couple of them. I'm not sure we'll have time for all of them. But down the left side here we have world history again. And the northern kingdom taken captive and the southern kingdom taken captive. And then you have the different empires, one following another. And I hope this will help you kind of remember things. I actually didn't make these for today. I had them for a youth camp 1 year. And comes down through these world empires, and then rise of the papacy and the Dark Ages, Reformation, and so on down to present day. Daniel was able to see and it was, let's turn to chapter 2 of, well, wait a minute, I guess we're not quite ready for that. I want to talk about Israel's chastisement first. That's the first column there. You should have it. I think it's on the back side of the world history, yeah. Need to talk about times, 7 times. We can read through this with you, and it says, and if you will not be reformed by me, this is God talking, but will walk contrary unto me. This is taken out of Leviticus. Then I will walk contrary unto you, and will punish you yet 7 times for your sins. If you read the Bible and you read 7 times, you probably didn't even stop there. What is 7 times? How long is this? It's a period of time. 7 times. And I'll make your cities waste. I'll scatter you among the heathen. And we know the history of Israel. They were scattered throughout all the world. And the sword, and remember the Holocaust of in the 1940s. Their land shall be desolate. A member of the Restoration went there in 1840, and he described the land. What was the man's name? I can't slip my mind right now, but there was a man dispatched, an elder of the church was dispatched from the church, went to the Holy Lands and dedicated it to the return of the Jewish people.
Orson Hyde.
Orson, was it Orson Hyde? Hyde is right. And so he went up on the Mount of Olives, and he describes it. It's in church history. And he said the land was desolate. And so God kept his word there. And then it go on, it says the period of a time is first mentioned in the Bible. And in prophetic terminology, a time is equal to 360, or 360 days. And so if you take 7 times 360, you come to 2,520 days. And so the Lord gives us a key to the understanding of the prophetic time periods when he explained to Ezekiel, thou shalt bear the iniquity of Judah 40 days. And then he says, I have appointed 1 day for a year. So you got, instead of 2,520 days, you've got 2,520 years. Time of the commencement of the 2,520 years of punishment is marked in the prophecy itself. It was when it was to begin when Israel would be delivered into the hands of the enemy and scattered among the heathen, and so on. So the whole house, the 12 tribes, continued to live in their promised land until Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria, or Samaria was another name for the northern kingdom, and did carry them away into Assyria. Why? Because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord their God, but transgressed his government and all that Moses, the servant of God, commanded. They became the northern kingdom became very wicked. And they were idolaters. And so the Lord allowed them, they were called his backsliding daughters, northern and southern kingdom. And so first, the northern kingdom was carried captive, the 10 tribes. And there's a book that I enjoy. How many of you have read or have the copy of this book? It's called Judah's Scepter and Joseph's Birthright. It's very helpful, isn't it? It really gives you a picture of the 2 tribes. You go back to the 49th chapter of Genesis, and Jacob blessed the 12 tribes. Remember that? And they were the first patriarchal blessings that I know about. And he blessed each of the tribe, and he said, the scepter will not depart from Judah. We talked about that this morning, that Jesus was prophesied, and he was of Judah. So, and then Joseph was to get, and when it came down to Joseph, he was the birthright. I remember when I was in Brush Hollow School, country school, and I wondered why America, hi Dean, welcome. Did they win? No. His grandson had a ball game last night. He had to be there. It's understandable. But Joseph's birthright, they were the birthright tribe. In 1 Chronicles 5th chapter, 1st verse, it talks about that. It says that Reuben was the firstborn of Israel, first of the 12 tribes. Reuben was, but he defiled his father's bed in some way. And so the birthright was given to Joseph. Of course, he was kind of a favorite son anyway, and he'd already proven himself. And so I was back to country school, got kind of away from that. I thought, why is America so blessed? I didn't know anything about this that connected it in with the scriptures, but he was a birthright. No wonder he was a choice nation above all the lands, because he was Joseph, and he had a double portion of blessing. The birthright person got a double portion of all the inheritance. So if you can get a hold of this book, it'll help you understand the Old Testament, New Testament, and then have this one too, because what I'm teaching you today, or endeavoring to teach, is based on Daniel McGregor's work. But when I put it out on a chart like this, you can see it's an amazing prophecy. And the first half of it is the prophecy of Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar's dream was the second. We're talking about, we better finish up on Israel's chastisement. So there's where the math comes in. The point of commencement of this era, and you always had to go with an era of beginning. Go back to your history on the other side. The era was 721 and 588 was when the two were carried captive, and so in the middle of that, you come up with the what it says here on the other side. The point of commencement of the Israel's chastisement is at the midpoint of the era of beginning 722 BC to 588 or 587, date of the final deportation of Judah. So you have the two dates, and then you choose a midpoint of that, and this date marks the beginning of the midpoint, therefore, can be calculated between 722 and 587, can come up to 654. I have worked the math, and it does work out. And this date marks the beginning of Israel's period of punishment of 7 times. 7 times 360 equals the 2,520 years. So then you have to convert prophetic years of 360 to our years, the solar years. Nick mentioned this morning, 365.25 days each year. And lo and behold, if you work the math, it comes out 1830 AD. Isn't that amazing? At the time the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people. This prophecy was fulfilled by the restoration of the gospel in 1830. Any questions on that? That's the first column here. Time of beginning, and you have the 2 dates and of the carrying captive. I think I should have filled in here Judah, the southern kingdom, and the northern kingdom. I guess I do. No, I don't have the date of the second kingdom over here in this column under Israel's chastisement. Then you pick the midpoint, and from that, and converted to 24 or 25, 20, wasn't it? 25, 20 prophetic years, change it to solar years, which is 2484. And you add them together and you come out to 1830. You have to pick up the 654 and add it to the 1830, and it'll come out to 2484. Everybody see that? I think it is fairly easy, especially if the calculations are already done for you. It helps. Then we'll go to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. That's in the second part here that we're going to study. And turn to, do a little something different now. Turn to Daniel, 2nd chapter. And we'll read. It's kind of interesting. I think the more you study the scriptures, the more you love them. And here's this man that lived 600 years before Christ. He's king. of the Babylonian Empire, which was a dominant empire in the world at that time, as far as we know. And we'll just start reading here, and we'll comment maybe a little bit as we go along. The second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers, we talked about them this morning, the wise men, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans forth to show the king his dream. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. He needed to have it interpreted. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac language, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. You ever forget anything? Boy, it's getting more problem for me all along. I lay something down, I don't remember where I left it, and have to go looking for things. And forget things, forget names, forget dreams. And so here said, the thing is gone from me. If you will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. But if you show the dream and the interpretation to me, he said, you'll receive gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. They answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. The king answered and said, I know of a certainty that you would gain the time, because you see the thing is gone from me. You're just stalling me here. But if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream. And if you can tell me the dream, I know that you can also interpret it for me. So, back to the Chaldeans again. Rachel, why don't you in 13, and then turn to Revelation 14. And this is one we Restoration preached. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. Worship him who made heaven and earth. And so again, I like the statement. I don't know whether I handed that out to you or not. Let's see. Yeah. On the back side of the vision of Daniel and John compared. You got that, I think, didn't you? Yeah. Okay, go down to the last, the last two paragraphs. I'll just read it through to you. Well, let's back up here. The event described in Revelation 14:6 of an angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to them that dwell on the earth, to revive religion. Well, this is quoting Reverend James Brown. In the early spring of 1820, a chain of events began to unfold that in 10 years culminated in the restoration of the everlasting gospel. It all began when a young man went to pray in an upstate New York woodland. In response to his prayer, two personages appeared and spoke to him. One of them spoke, you've heard this 1,000 times, calling him by name. pointing to the other, "This is my beloved son, hear him." The young man, Joseph Smith, was not yet 15 years of age, and as such was without guile or agenda. He simply wanted to know which church he should join. He was surprised by the answer, join none of them. And the prophecy of Revelation 14:6 was about to be fulfilled. Now, I like this last paragraph. Joseph's testimony stands alone in his assertion that an angel did indeed fly in the midst of heaven to restore the fullness of the everlasting gospel, just as John the Beloved had prophesied. Prophesied length of time for the fulfillment of the prophecies of John and Daniel had elapsed. Surely they were not false prophets. Those who reject the claims of Joseph Smith are faced with the formidable task of finding a more plausible fulfillment of the prophecies of these prophets. If you don't believe it, you try to fulfill the prophets. Can you find a better answer, a better fulfillment of these prophecies? Only Joseph Smith has stood up and stuck out his neck and said, "This is the fulfillment of these prophecies." Nobody else has been able to do it. Yet they will reject Joseph's testimony a lot of times. I like that last sentence. Those who reject the claims of Joseph Smith are faced with a formidable task of finding a more plausible, a better answer. There is none. And so, if this isn't enough to convince you of the restoration, I don't know what will. But these two great prophets of God, Daniel and John, I love them both. I hope to meet them someday. And shake their hands. If we could just be as close to God as Daniel and John. I love John because he was an eyewitness. He stayed with Jesus all the way to the cross. He stood there, putting his own life in danger. And to remember when Jesus turned and said, "John, there's your mother. Mother, there." No wonder he was called John the Beloved. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. And Joseph Smith, Jr., I hope he's there too, and I can shake his hand, because he went through hell too to restore the gospel to the earth. We should be so thankful for that. And I wonder, my briefcase. Yeah, my briefcase. Can you hand me my briefcase? She forgot her hearing aids this morning, so I can't even operate it without mine, so. You've seen these a dozen times. I don't know who's going to get them when I die, but I hope they fall into some good hands, because the testimony behind this is in 1997. Was that when we went? 1997. Whitney was born in 96, and she was just a baby, so she was born in November, so it's 1997. We took 5 minivan loads of young people out to Palmyra, went into the Sacred Grove, and Wesley Swift, Andrea's nephew, was with us. And Wesley was about 14 and a half years old then, about the same age as Joseph Smith. He came to Burton. He said, "Burton, come and look at this pile of rocks." And Burton went to look at the pile of rocks, and Burton just kind of shrugged his shoulders. "Wesley, what's wrong with you? I don't see anything special about this." I don't think he said that, but probably thought it. And Wesley was going to be deterred, so he came, and I didn't know about him getting Burton to go look at the pile of rocks, but I went and looked at the pile of rocks, and I was about to say the same, or think the same thing, I think, but I thought, well, I'm going to walk up on top of the pile of rocks, and this was sticking out of the pile of rocks. And we'd found some sliced stones here, one down by the volleyball court. I didn't bring them today, another one over here by the flagpole. I'd cut a big old thistle and carried it across the road in the timber. And there, looked down, saw this 5 sliced stone. And so we were kind of acquainted with sliced stones, and I picked this up, and I noticed there was line around it, and 2 tables of stone. And of course, I immediately thought of Moses going up on the mount and getting the 10 Commandments and or the Gospel the first time, I guess. But I'm not sure what was on the first ones. But he got angry and he threw them down. They broke. I wouldn't dare throw these down because they're breakable. I'm pretty sure. A little chip off here. And I had them for a year, but I knew they were very significant. And I had gone to Israel with a man by the name of Ron Wyatt in 1991, and he told me that he had seen the Ark of the Covenant, and also he was handed the tables of stone, and he said, Francis, the stones that Moses carried were small. He said they would fit in a patch pocket of a coverall. They were that small. And then he referred me to Exodus 32:15. It said Moses turned to go down from the mount with the tables of stone in his hand, one hand. They weren't the Charles Heston with 2 great big rocks on each side. They were small. They were small like this. And he said when he went into the cave where the Ark of the Covenant rests, he said there were 4 angels, custodial, I call them custodial angels, watching over the Ark of the Covenant. And he said the angel handed him the tablets, and he looked at them, and I said, what'd you do with them then? He said, I gave them back to the angel. Where did Joseph Smith hand the plates back? He handed them back to a custodial angel, Moroni. And so Exodus 32 gives us an idea of what the size were, and I can hold these in my hand very easily. I think they're replica of the stones that Moses carried down from the mount. And very precious. Not the message of them is that in this place, in the sacred grove, there was a prophet like Moses. And Moses was a prophet like Jesus. And so it's another testimony, isn't it, of the restoration, that something happened in that grove beyond human comprehension. God and Jesus appeared to a young man. And we're the beneficiaries. We received this, and we are few in number. But Jesus said there would be few. How many were saved during the day of Noah? 8 souls. And so we better be careful. We better be careful. Few there be that find it. And so handle them carefully. I wanted to read you something about John. I'll probably run over time here. Bob, let's look here. It's talking about John. Stories about John the Beloved. You Eusebius tells another story of John in his later years that had arrived in a town not far from Ephesus. After having exhorted the brethren, he observed a young man of a noble countenance and ardent spirit. Addressing the pastor or the bishop, he said, "I commit this young man to thy charge." The elder at first conscientiously fulfilled his task. He received the young man into his house, and at length baptized him. But the lad allowed himself to be drawn away into immorality and then into theft. He fled the town and became the chief of a band of robbers. A short time after, John came back. And he asked the bishop, "Restore me the trust I committed to thee." And the bishop did not at once understand. "I ask," said John, "for the young man whose soul I trusted to you." The elder said, "He's dead." And he cried many tears. "How dead?" "Dead to God," was the reply. "He fell away and was forced to flee for his crimes and is now a robber in the mountains." Hearing these words, John rent his clothes. "What a guardian did I leave over my brother!" He quit the church, made his way to the mountains. He left. John left the church, made his way to the mountains, and gave himself up to the robbers. No. The young man recognized the apostle and was about to flee, but John ran after him, exclaiming, "My son, why dost thou flee from thy father? Have pity on me. There is yet hope of salvation. I will stand for thee before the Lord Christ. If need be, I will die for you, as he died for us." Stop! The young man listened with downcast eyes, then flung away his weapons and burst into tears. Throwing his arms around the aged saint, he implored his pardon. With a flood of tears, which were to him as a second baptism, the apostle raised him up and did not leave him till he had restored him to the church, a living trophy of Christian love. During his last years, he lived in the city of Ephesus, John. He had grown old and feeble and was no longer able to speak from the pulpit of the church where he had worshiped. But they carried him there every Sunday, and he sat there through the service with that light on his face. At the end of the service, the minister would ask him to say just a word to the people. He would rise slowly, look down upon them with a smile, and say, "Little children, love one another." Don't be ashamed of the restoration. You don't need to be ashamed of the restoration. You don't need to be ashamed of the Book of Mormon. It's a wonderful message, and I think I shared a little bit last night about the young man that is a builder that was in my store last Saturday. He said he couldn't understand why people would baptize little children. And I read him from the Book of Mormon. I told you about that. And read him about the part from Mosiah 187, 188, about being born again. I said, 7 billion people need to be born again. And he said, I need to be baptized. And I missed my opportunity. I didn't say, I know somebody can baptize you if I can't anymore. I know some big huskies that could, like Mark McCormick or others. But we don't need to back off from sharing the gospel. And I think the day is going to come when people are going to come out of the woods and looking for people like you to tell them the truth. Who was it said, I just want to know the truth? Don't we all? and we have it. We're the best. We're the beneficiaries, but we're the guardians of it and the promulgators of it, and we need to share it and maybe be like John, willing to die rather than run out into the hills to find somebody that's gone astray, looking for the lost sheep. One thing, I got lots of books talking a little bit about these. When's the Lord going to come? We don't know, but we know it's soon. Brother Ram gave me this book, A Visitor's Guide to China, and I was reading in here about Tibet. It says the Dalai Lama lives in Dharamsala, India at this time. And he's the 14th Dalai Lama. I'm just reading the last sentence. The present Dalai Lama is over there in India. He's the 14th, and it was predicted long ago that there would be only 14 Dalai Lamas. Only 14. I wonder why not 15? Why not 16? And that book was given to me. This book was also given to me. It was bought on a garage sale, I guess, probably in a sack of books. Only probably cost 50 cents for all of them. And Lou Wade, my secretary, 95 years old, it fell this week. She's back home again. Gave me this book. She said, this looks like it might be something you'd be interested in. I wasn't interested in it. I threw it in the bottom desk drawer. It's in there for a couple of years. But when I read this about the 14th Dalai Lama, and it says many years ago, I wondered how long many years ago was. And or when they actually had that prophecy. And I got to reading this one day, and I came across something here that sounded familiar and something interesting. It says that centuries ago, it was told that there'd be only 14 Dalai Lamas. And he said, I knew that our own beloved Dalai Lama would be the last actual Dalai Lama. And although there would be one more, he would be not be of the same spiritual significance. So they're on the last Dalai Lama. And when I was down at the Religious Museum between Logan and Missouri Valley one day, and I went back into the west wing of that, and there's a prophecy given by a Catholic priest back in about the 1100s. Said there'd only be 111 popes, and we're on the last pope. So why the last pope? And why the last Dalai Lama? I think the King of Kings is coming. We won't need any more Dalai Lamas. We won't need any more popes. Think about it. They're both over 80.
If you think about it, will the next prophet be Jesus Christ himself for the church?
Yeah, I think so.
You know the descendant of Joseph Smith that lead the church?
He'll lead the whole world.
Yeah.
Back to the restoration. I told Brother Ram one day when I was going down, I took him back to Kansas City. He flew into Kansas City. He thought Woodbine was close to Kansas City, I guess. But so he had a round trip ticket, so I had to take him back down there, and we were just pretty close to KCI. And I said, Brother Ram, he also gave me this book, The Paul and the Gospel of God. I said, Brother Ram, I believe the Restoration Branch movement is the best depository of the gospel on the earth today. I thought, this depository? Why would I call it a depository? I never thought about that before. Then I was on my way to Hong Kong one time, and I thought I better read this book. It talks about how the gospel was taken to Nepal. And on page 89, I got about this far, and here's what I read. In the early days after Christ's resurrection and ascension, the disciples called this message the deposit. Where do you put a deposit? Put it in a depository, a bank. Put it in a place of safekeeping. The gospel, the everlasting gospel, was delivered to the earth again. It was deposited on the earth again in 1830. So, the Lord had given me these words, and the best depository, that's where you put the deposit. In the early days after Christ's resurrection and ascension, the disciples called this message the deposit. And the good news, 3 times in that paragraph it talks about the gospel being called a deposit. That was good news to me. It confirmed the truth of what I had told Brother Rom, that what I had said is absolutely true. It is the best depository of the gospel on the earth today. Then I like this book, Arabian Sands. You know, the Nephites left Jerusalem. They went down, as near as we can tell, they went down along the Gulf, along the rift of valley of the Dead Sea, and on south to the Gulf of Aqaba, and then they probably turned east. Said they went due east and traveled for 8 years. They came to a place they called Bountiful. And Nephi describes that in the 5th chapter of the first Nephi. This is where I'm going to end. The 5th chapter. Here's what it says, and we did sojourn for the space of many years, yea, even 8 years in the wilderness. And we did come to the land which we called Bountiful, because of its much fruit and wild honey. And all these things were prepared for the Lord. The Lord provides for his people. And he pitched their tents, and they stayed there a while, and he built the boat, and it says, and the Lord did show me from time to time how to work the timbers as a ship. Well, how are you going to build a ship out of trees like that? In the deserts, you don't have trees. You just have sand, and if there's a vegetation at all, it'd be just a little. How in the world are you going to build a boat out of that? Well, this man, this was in about 600 BC. This man was about 1950s. In the 1950s, he explored Saudi Arabia, and I want you to hear something. He said there's one place, there's 1,400 miles of coastline on Saudi Arabia. That's in the news every night, probably be in the news again tonight because they had their oil bombed. And but there's a place there that the mountains come kind of like a horseshoe out to the Arabian Sea, and it catches the monsoon rain, so they get rains there. And out of 1,400 miles of coastline, there's only 20 miles that has this, and it says they came into this area in their exploration, and there was green meadows, cattle grazing, spreading trees. On the other side of the mountain was nothing, empty desert, sand, rocks, and describes here the trees in this area. They were like jungle trees, and great fig trees rise above the wind-rippled grass like oaks in an English park. And he mentions that the language of these people that live in that area is different, and they're related to the ancient Semitic languages. Semitic language would be like Israeli. Well, I don't know how long the Nephites stayed there building their boat, but there were timbers there. And after he had stayed there 10 days, they went to the market some distance out of their own area. And he said they carried, here's what they were going to sell: butter, firewood, because that'd be a great commodity where you can't grow any trees, firewood, butter, and a pot of wild honey. So there is a land bountiful, still there today after 2,500 years. We don't have to be ashamed of the Book of Mormon. It confirms the truth of what we believe, and it's so well spoken so many times, such a blessing to us and to others. If we can, and I think the day is going to soon come when people are going to become searching for the truth, and we'll be expected to share it with them. God bless you. I love you all.